Did you know the Australian government planned to cap the number of foreign students at 2.7 lakh by 2025? Well, that didn't go as planned. The bill didn't get enough votes in Parliament. Even without that cap, the government hasn't backed off. Instead, they've introduced indirect measures to make visa approvals harder, especially for students. And their reasoning? The housing crisis. They are saying international students are part of the problem, pointing out how they take up a lot of apartments and houses. The latest data shows that Indian students are facing higher visa rejection rates compared to others. If the housing crisis is the issue, should not all international students be impacted equally? So why are student visas from India being rejected more often? Hello and welcome to another episode of The Data Point. Let's talk about Australia's housing crisis. It's becoming harder and harder to find affordable homes. Rental prices are skyrocketing and the number of properties available to rent is shrinking. How bad is this housing crisis? The Rental Affordability Index paints a pretty clear picture. This index measures how affordable rentals are based on household incomes. A higher score means better affordability. But as you can see, it's been plummeting across all major cities in Australia. In response, the government has stepped in, and one of their moves is to crack down on the inflow of international students, who are the largest migrant group. But is this the right approach? While the government believes so, others disagree. Let's talk about international students and their role in Australia's housing market. A widely cited report by the Property Council of Australia found that international students only make up about 4% of the rental market in 2024. A Guardian analysis shows that students form about 6 to 7% of the rental market. But the government is approaching the issue from another angle. According to the government, around 60% students live in apartments, 26% students in detached houses, and the rest in hostels or university housing. So, are international students really the cause of Australia's housing crisis? Well, that's still up for debate. Meanwhile, last year, international students to Australia far outnumbered skilled migrants and other visa categories. The Australian government pointed to this surge in student numbers as a key factor worsening the housing crisis. This argument was used to justify plans to limit student intake. But when you look closer, there is something worth noting. The restrictions haven't been applied evenly, revealing some significant disparities. So what's really going on here? Let's dive deeper. The data shows that students from certain countries, especially India, have been hit much harder than others like China. Before the pandemic, the visa grant rate for all students applying to higher education and vocational courses was over 90%. Now, it's dropped below to 80%. But here's the catch. For Chinese students, the visa grant rate is still close to 95%. Meanwhile, Indian students have seen a steep drop from nearly 90% to just 65%. So what's causing this disparity? Could it be because Indian students tend to study in regions with severe housing shortages? Let's take a closer look at the two largest groups of international students in Australia, India and China, and how they fit into the housing crisis debate. In Sydney, where the housing crisis is more severe, Chinese students actually outnumber Indian students. Meanwhile, in Melbourne, where the housing situation is relatively better, Indian students outnumber Chinese. So, if the housing crisis were the main reason for increased visa denials, you'd expect Chinese students more concentrated in Sydney to face more rejections. But that's not what's happening. Indian students are facing higher denial rates. So, what's actually going on here? The answer might lie elsewhere, possibly in a growing issue: mountain visa fraud. The Australian Department of Education has highlighted something important on its website. It says there's a higher proportion of high-risk student visa applications coming from countries like India, Nepal, and Pakistan. This includes incomplete applications and cases of fraudulent documentation. What does this mean for visa processing? Delays. If we compare visa processing times between April and July in 2023 and 2024, Indian student visas took much longer to process than those of Chinese students. Australia has made it clear. It values the large number of applications from countries like India and China. But it's also ramping up scrutiny, especially for applications flagged as higher risk, that is, those from India. So, what's the takeaway? By rejecting more student visas from India, Australia seems to be killing two birds with one stone. First, they're tackling the housing crisis. By reducing the student intake, the government hopes to ease pressure on the rental market and make housing more affordable. Second, they are not compromising on the quality of students. By focusing on fraudulent visa applications, they can limit the numbers while still welcoming genuine students. This explains why the denial rate is higher for Indians, which is a high-risk country, and is much lower for Chinese. In essence, Australia is achieving two goals: managing its housing crisis and maintaining the integrity of its student visa program. Thank you for watching this video, and for more such videos, please subscribe to The Hindu.